There's a place 7 kilometres south of Paris that is larger than the entire Principality of Monaco. It opens at 3 in the morning, it employs 13,000 people every single day, and it supplies food to 18 million people across the Ile-de-France. And almost nobody who visits Paris knows about it. This is Fabulously Delicious, the French food podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Pryor. Enchanté. Today, we're going to Rungis. You think you know Paris. You know the restaurants, the markets, the boulangeries, the fromageries. But there is a whole other city operating while Paris sleeps. One that has been feeding the city in one form or another for over 1,000 years. It survived one of the most audacious moves in modern history, and that quietly underpins every extraordinary meal that you've ever eaten in France. Come with me. We're going somewhere most visitors never go, and I promise it's worth the early morning alarm. Today we're talking about one of the most extraordinary places, I think, in the food world. A place that most visitors to Paris never see. It operates while the city sleeps and quietly underpins everything that makes French food culture the envy of the world. We're going back to the beginning, to a medieval market on the Ile de la City that grew over 1,000 years into the legendary Les Halles, the belly of Paris, before the whole extraordinary operation was uprooted in one of the most audacious logistical operations in modern French history and transplanted 7 kilometres south to the suburbs. We're talking about the move of the century, the scale of what was built, the sectors, the chefs, the buyers, the restaurants that serve steak frites at 4 in the morning, and the tradition of onion soup that survived the journey from the old city and never left. And we're talking about how to visit, because with a brand new metro station and the best access the market has ever had, there's never been a better time to go and see it for yourself. This is Rungis, and it's one of those places that once you know about it, changes how you think about food entirely. To understand Rungis, you first have to understand what came before it. For nearly 1,000 years, the beating heart of Paris's food supply was Les Halles, a sprawling, chaotic, magnificent market right in the centre of the city, just a stone's throw from the St. Eustace Church in the first arrondissement. It started as a modest market on the Ile de la City as far back as the 5th century, moved to the covered pavilions in Les Halles in 1181, and by the 19th century had become something truly extraordinary. Victor Baltard, the architect tasked with reimagining it under Napoleon III, created 10 iconic pavilions of cast iron, brick and glass, and it became one of the great architectural statements of Paris. And Émile Zola, who knew the place intimately, gave it the name that stuck forever, Le Ventre de Paris, the belly of Paris, because that's exactly what it was, the place where the city fed itself every single night, in a glorious, overwhelming, slightly chaotic symphony of crates and carts and noise and smells. And what a place it was. Every night, the so-called diables, those who wheeled carts piled high with tomatoes, apples, oranges, and flowers, they rattled through the alleyways between the pavilions. Transactions were settled in cash, often over a glass of Beaujolais and a good plate of food at one of the market's famous all-night restaurants. The onion soup served in the early hours of the morning to market workers, chefs, and the occasional Parisian who had simply stayed out too late became one of the great culinary traditions of the city. It was alive in a way that very few places in any city have ever been alive. Raw and commercial and beautiful all at once. But by the post-war years, Paris had outgrown it entirely. The population of Ile-de-France was growing fast. Demand was diversifying, and 10 hectares in the heart of the city, with no room to expand and increasingly impossible traffic, simply could not keep up. The decision to move was made by Prime Minister Michel Debré in 1959, under de Gaulle, and it was not a popular one. The belly of Paris had an unsuspected gravity, as one account put it at the time, and convincing buyers and wholesalers and an entire city to let it go was almost harder than building the replacement. On February the 28th in 1969, Parisians gathered for the last night of Les Halles. Florists threw sheaves of flowers onto the streets. A brass band played outside St. Eustace. People danced around pyramids of vegetable crates. And then it was all over. Les Halles was demolished in 1971 despite petitions, and in its place today you'll find the Forum des Halles shopping centre and one of the busiest metro stations in Europe, which, depending on your feelings about architecture heritage, is either progress or a crime. I want to mention something because if this episode is making you want to get on a plane to Paris, I have something that might help with that. My book, Paris, A Fabulous Food Guide to the World's Most Delicious City, has just been newly updated, and I'm genuinely excited about this new third edition. It's bigger than ever, with more than 100 additional pages on the history of food of Paris. You'll also understand not just where to eat, but why Paris became the gastronomic capital of the world in the first place. Which, if you're a regular listener, you'll know is exactly the kind of thing I love. The story behind the food and not just the food itself. Alongside all my favourite boulangeries, patisseries, fromageries, wine bars, markets, and those hidden gems, the new edition has a dedicated section for vegan and vegetarian dining. Beautiful food with a view options. And because, well, why not, a special section on the locations featured in the Netflix show Emily in Paris. So yes, you can absolutely go and sit where they sat and eat where Emily eats. No judgment here whatsoever. It's the guide I wish I'd had when I first arrived in France, full of personal recommendations, trusted addresses, and the kind of places that make you close your eyes and think of the first bite. Yum. You can order a copy directly from my website at andrewpryorfabulously.com. It makes the perfect gift for the food lover in your life. It's also on Amazon, or you can ask your local independent bookshop to order it in. Supporting local bookshops is always a fabulous idea. Right, now let's go to Rungis. The decision to move Les Halles didn't happen overnight. In fact, French authorities had been trying to relocate the market for nearly a century and a half before they finally managed to do it. The formal decision was made on September the 30th in 1953, when the French government decided to create a network of national interest markets across the country, Paris chief among them. The question then was, well, where? The site needed to be at the crossroads of major road, rail and air routes, with room to grow and easy access for the trucks, the trains and the planes that would supply it. Several locations were considered and eliminated before the government settled on March the 14th in 1960 on the municipalities of Chevilly and Rungis, 7 kilometres south of Paris, close to all the major motorways, with a railway connection and right next to Orly Airport. 600 hectares of agricultural land were designated. 2 declarations of public utility were issued, and on February the 11th in 1964, the first pickaxe went into the ground. What followed was 5 years of construction on a scale that's almost hard to comprehend. 3 million cubic metres of land was levelled. Aqueducts moved, high voltage power lines reorganised, 25 kilometres of roads built, 35 hectares of car parks laid, 66,500 metres of pipes installed, and 4,500 telephone lines connected. All of that before a single vegetable crate had arrived. And then came the move itself, what was described at the time as the move of the century, and it's hard to argue with that description. Over the weekend of February the 27th to March the 1st in 1969, 1,000 wholesale companies, 20,000 people, 10,000 cubic metres of equipment and 5,000 tonnes of goods made the journey from the centre of Paris to Rungis. In 1,500 trucks, including 400 removal lorries, along roads that were barely adequate for the task. To manage the logistics, a former general from the small cavalry school had been recruited, which tells you everything about the scale of this operation. And the timing could hardly have been more complicated. That same weekend, US President Richard Nixon was visiting Paris. The city was bracing for gridlock, and the ring road wasn't even finished yet. And yet, somehow, almost miraculously, it just worked. Parisians stayed away from the moving routes. The A6 motorway was quieter than anybody had ever seen it. And by the time the market opened its doors on the morning of the March the 3rd in 1969, 1,000 wholesalers were in place and ready for their first customers. There were parties on the trading floor. Television cameras were, well, everywhere. Stars performed on makeshift stages. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, according to a persistent legend that nobody has ever quite managed to disprove, a number of the rats that had called Les Halles home for generations climbed aboard the removal trucks and made their journey too. They were never seen in Rungis, and where they went, well, that remains delightfully a mystery. Let's talk about scale, because until you look at the numbers, it's very hard to grasp what Rungis actually is. The market covers 232 hectares. To put that into perspective, it is slightly larger than the entire Principality of Monaco, and roughly the size of a small town. With those 232 hectares, there are 72 hectares of covered buildings, including 47 hectares dedicated purely to commercial use. Every single day, 13,000 people come to work there. 26,000 vehicles pass through the gates, 3,000 of them heavy trucks. Nearly 1.7 million tonnes of products move through the markets every year, supplying food to around 18 million people across the Ile-de-France. And the annual turnover is 12 billion euros. It is, by almost any measure, the largest wholesale food market in the world. And then there are the sectors. Fruits and vegetables alone occupy 11 buildings spread across 66 hectares. By far the largest single sector on the site. Then there's the meat sector, the seafood pavilion with its own ice tower, and nightly veterinary checks. The dairy and gastronomy section with its 7 pavilions, including a dedicated organic pavilion, which opened in 2016. And there's an entire section devoted to cut flowers, potted plants and horticultural products. Every night from around 3 a.m, all of this comes alive simultaneously. Buyers moving between pavilions, trucks unloading at loading docks, veterinary services conducting checks on fish and meat, 10,000 samples analysed every year for hormones, parasites and toxins. And then, as reliably as the sun comes up, by 11 a.m, the shelves are empty and the market goes quiet. The whole extraordinary machine resets and prepares to do it all over again tomorrow night. So let's walk the site, because Rungis isn't just a market, it's essentially a small city, organised into distinct neighbourhoods, each dedicated to a different category of food, and each with its own culture, its own rhythm, and its own cast of characters. The fruit and vegetable section is where you start, simply because it's the largest. 11 buildings spread across 66 hectares with 9 dedicated sales pavilions. A specific tile for the Ile-de-France producers, bringing in local seasonal produce and a series of logistical warehouses behind it. This is the sector that most people picture when they think of Rungis. Towers of crates, forklifts moving at speed, buyers examining produce under the harsh white light of the pavilions at 4 a.m. It is busy and it is loud, and it is the engine room of the whole operation. The meat sector arrived 4 years after the rest of the market in January 1973, and today it is one of the most impressive parts of the site. 1 pavilion for butcher's meat, 2 for pork, 1 for poultry and game, and 1 for offal, and 8 warehouses behind that. The seafood sector, known at Rungis as the Marais, the tide, operates with its own particular intensity, with veterinary services conducting checks every single night and an ice tower dedicated purely to keeping the fish at the correct temperatures from the moment that they arrive. And then there is the dairy and the gastronomy sector, 7 pavilions including 2 dedicated to dairy products, 4 to catering supplies, and since 2016, a standalone organic pavilion. inaugurated by President Francois Hollande, part of an ambition to double the market's organic supply within 5 years. Finally, perhaps the most surprising section for the first-time visitors is an entire area dedicated to horticulture and decoration, with an air-conditioned pavilion for cut flowers and foliage, 3 heated pavilions for potted plants, 2 greenhouses, and a series of mixed buildings for plants and accessories. Rungis supplies not just the restaurants and food shops of Paris, but the florists too, which somehow makes the whole place feel even more extraordinary than it already is. There is a tradition at Rungis that I think deserves its own episode, frankly. When you have 13,000 people arriving in the middle of the night to work through until the early hours of the morning, those people, well, they need to eat. And Rungis, being French, takes that responsibility extremely seriously. The market has its own restaurants, proper restaurants, not canteens. They open at the early hours and serve full meals to the buyers, wholesalers, truck drivers, and workers who keep the place running. We're talking steak frites, roast chicken, cheese boards, wine, proper food, cooked properly at 4 in the morning, which is one of those details that feels completely improbable until you remember that this is France, and of course that's how it works. And then there is the onion soup, the tradition of eating soup à l'oignon in the early hours of the morning. It goes back to Les Halles itself. It was the dish of the market workers, slow-cooked, overnight, rich with beef stock and topped with a thick crust of melted cheese, served in an all-night restaurant that surrounded the old pavilions. Well, that tradition made the journey to Rungis, and it's never left. There is something genuinely wonderful about the idea that at 5 in the morning in a restaurant inside the world's largest food market, you can sit down to a bowl of onion soup that connects you directly to a tradition that steps back centuries in the heart of Paris. It's the kind of thing that reminds you that French food culture isn't just about food on the plate. It's about the whole world that surrounds it. The timing, the setting, the ritual, all of it matters, and at Rungis, all of it is still very much intact. Right, a quick pause before we go any further. If you're enjoying this and want more of this kind of thing in your life, come and find me on Substack. It's called Fabulously Delicious. Same name, but different format, and it's where I share the things that don't always make it onto the podcast. Restaurant tips, recipes that I'm currently testing, French food finds, behind-the-scenes stories from life out here in rural France, and honestly, just the kind of food gossip that comes with living and breathing this stuff every day. Think of it as the bonus course after you've had your weekly audio entree. A little more personal, a little more detailed, and very, very French. For those of you who are new here, welcome, and I'm so glad that you found us. I was a contestant on MasterChef Australia back in, 2013, which completely changed the direction of my life. And not long after, I moved to France. And now I've been here for more than 10 years, living in the French countryside, hosting cooking classes and culinary experiences, as well as spending a frankly unreasonable amount of time thinking about food. French food. The podcast, the Substack, cooking classes, it all comes from the same place. Genuine love of French food culture and wanting to share it with you, the people that love it the same as me. You can subscribe to the Substack for free or go paid if you'd like to support the podcast and help me keep making it. Every paid subscription genuinely makes a difference, and I really am grateful for every single one. You'll find the link in the show notes for this episode, or just simply go to andrewpryorfabulously.com for more details. Why not come for the croissants, but stay because you're fabulous? So, who actually shops at Rungis? The short answer is pretty much not you. At least not without some planning. Rungis is a wholesale market, which means it is strictly reserved for accredited professionals. To buy here, you need a buyer's card, which requires proof of a registered professional activity, such as a restaurant, a food shop, a catering business, or a florist. You cannot simply just turn up at the gate with a shopping bag and a sense of adventure and expect to be let in. The market exists to supply the trade, and it takes that purpose seriously. On any given night, the buyers moving through the pavilions are restaurant chefs, including some of the most accredited and celebrated in Paris. Fishmongers, butchers, greengrocers, caterers, hotel buyers, and supermarket wholesales. They are all doing business in the particular intense focused way that people do when they are spending serious money on serious quantities of food at 4 in the morning. But that said, Rungis is not entirely closed to the curious. The market runs official guided tours for visitors, and if you have any interest in food at all, I would put it near the top of your list when you're next in Paris. There's something extraordinary about walking through those pavilions in the middle of the night, watching the whole operation unfold around you, the crates, the produce arriving, the buyers examining and negotiating, the refrigerated trucks backing up the loading docks, the restaurants filling up with workers taking a break. It is Paris at its most real and its most alive, in a way that, well, no restaurant or food shop can quite replicate. The market's quality standards are extraordinarily high. 10,000 samples are analysed every year. Nightly veterinarian checks on the seafood, strict controls on everything from hormones in the meat to toxins in fish. That rigour filters directly into the quality of what ends up on Parisian plates. Rungis doesn't just supply French gastronomy. In a very real sense, it underwrites it. And the relationship goes both ways. The presence of the world's greatest concentration of food professionals in just one place, chefs, wholesalers, producers, importers, creates a market that is uniquely responsive to the demands of serious cooking. When a new ingredient becomes fashionable in Parisian kitchens, Rungis finds a way to supply it. When a producer in Brittany lands an exceptional catch of oysters, or a farmer in Provence brings in the first tomatoes of the season, Rungis is the mechanism that gets those ingredients to the people who can do the most extraordinary things with them. It is, in the most literal sense, the engine room of French cuisine. If you'd like a little more fabulously delicious between episodes, come and join me on Instagram. I'm at Andrew Pryor Fabulously. That's where I share bite-sized French food history, fun facts, behind-the-scenes moments, and plenty of everyday life in France. It's the perfect little snack between podcast courses. And if you prefer to watch the podcast as well as listen, you can find the full video episodes over on YouTube. Same stories, same deliciousness, just with my face attached. More food, more stories, more fabulous. Come join the party. It's très scrollable. Apparently that's something young French people say. Et voila. That's the end of today's episode of Fabulously Delicious, the French Food Podcast. If this episode made you hungry, happy, or suddenly Googling line 14 timetable at 3 in the morning, perfect. If you enjoyed it, leave a review, share it with a fellow food lover, and come say bonjour. I always love hearing from you. And if you like this episode, there's plenty more waiting for you. Just search Fabulously Delicious on whatever platform you're listening to right now. Until next time, eat well, stay curious, and whatever you do it fabulously. Merci beaucoup, bon app, et à très bientôt.